Good afternoon, and welcome to the first in the series of NHLBI Small Business Hangouts. My name is Eric Padmore, and I will be the moderator for this afternoon's presentation. The NHLBI Office of Translational Alliances and Coordination has developed this series to help educate our small business applicants and awardees on topics that will be helpful to their business and research enterprises. Today's presentation will focus on FDA regulatory information. If you are watching through a Google Plus Hangout account, you can submit questions throughout the presentation by commenting on the Hangout event page. If you are watching on YouTube, you can submit questions via Twitter using the hashtag SBIRchat, all one string. I will be moderating questions, and we will be answering those at the conclusion of each segment of the Hangout. Today's presenter is Dr. Chris Sasiela. Dr. Sasiela earned her doctorate in pharmaceutical sciences from the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy. After postdoctoral studies at the National Cancer Institute, she was awarded a fellowship to work at the FDA and learned the regulator's perspective on product safety review. She completed her fellowship at the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research's Division of Monoclonal Antibodies. After her fellowship, Chris joined the NHLBI after leading a regulatory affairs and services team in private industry for several years. Within the NHLBI, Chris serves as a regulatory resource for the Institute's small business awardees and for investigators who are developing or performing clinical investigations using new technologies. Today, Dr. Sasiela will be presenting an overview of the FDA website, providing search tips, and making us aware of a number of resources available to assist small businesses in developing their technologies. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome to our audience today on this Google Plus Hangout. I'm going to switch over to a slide deck, and then we're going to go directly into navigating the website. So, as Eric mentioned, this is the first Small Biz Hangout that our office has coordinated, and our topic today is going to be navigating the FDA website. Why navigating the FDA website? Last year, in my role as a regulatory strategist within the NHLBI, I worked with approximately 70 to 80 small business concerns in terms of counseling them in their regulatory strategy and understanding the pathways that they would need to follow in order to begin their regulatory clearance or approval processes. And I discovered that there were a number of common questions that came up with small businesses. And what I'd like to try and accomplish today is to address two of those. The first is, what resources do you as a small business have access to help inform your technology development? And then the second question is, who can you talk to at FDA? So the learning objectives for today's seminar are going to be aware of and able to identify the reference documents that can inform your product development, the small business resources that the biomedical centers at FDA have developed, and just as a reminder, there are 3 biomedical centers: the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research, the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, and the Center for Devices and Radiologic Health. And then also helping you identify where you can find the organizational charts for the biomedical centers so that you can identify reviewers who might be engaged in the regulation of your specific product, and offices that FDA has established to address specific development areas that don't fit within one concrete center. And then finally, we're going to go back to the FDA homepage and take a look at how to sign up for relevant FDA updates, including information about guidance documents, upcoming public meetings, workshops, and meetings that FDA may be coming to in your geographic area so that you can have one-on-one personal contact with FDA staff. So with that, I'm going to now switch over to the live website demonstration. So the homepage for the FDA is www.fda.gov, and this is what the homepage looks like. And you'll see that it is organized in a very user-friendly manner, and yet there's so much information that it can be hard to identify exactly what you're looking for. If you want to understand more about the regulation for food, drugs, medical devices, or radiation-emitting products, as you can see, there are some tabs across the top here that are useful to get you to broad category areas. If you're looking for something a little more specific and concrete, if you look up at the upper right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a search bar. We'll be using that extensively today, as it's a very useful way to find information on the FDA website. I have found in my experience that bookmarking pages can be a little bit tricky because FDA occasionally does reorganize their website, and so it's easier to just do a quick search as long as you understand what search terms you want to use. If you just want to investigate the homepage, then you'll notice over here on the right-hand side there are four sort of broad research areas, and down here, the fourth one down with the little gear on it says for industry. If you were to click on that link, you would find that there are a number of broad industry resources available to you. So let's take just a little bit more of a look at the homepage by scrolling down. This carousel up here normally rotates between a number of different stories that are of broad general interest to the public, but usually are not of specific interest to industry. For industry-specific information, you might be interested in recalls and alerts, approvals and clearances, or reporting a problem. FDA wants you to know about the different initiatives that they have going on, so they keep those front and center on the home page, very easy to find. News and events, if there are recent recalls or problems with devices or therapeutics that have been out there, or food issues, drug shortages, that sort of information will come into news and events. And then at the bottom of the page, you'll find general information about FDA, ways to follow FDA. We'll be coming back to this in a little bit, and some general background information about the regulatory agency itself. So, as I mentioned earlier, many small businesses don't really have any experience with or knowledge of how FDA works and where to find either basic information about the regulatory process or specific information to inform their product development work. So each center within FDA has developed a set of resources to help the public and industry understand how they operate. They call these resources their Learn series. And what I want to do is I want to come up here to the Search FDA box, and I'm going to type in Learn, and then I'm going to put in the CBER, which is the abbreviation for the Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. So when you come to this top bar, the top return says OCTGT Learn, and this is the Office of Cellular Tissue and Gene Therapies within the Center for Biologics. This is the primary site for the Biologics Learn series. And when you come to this site, you'll see there's a course list. And if you scroll through, you'll see there's quite a variety of areas that you can learn about, everything from the regulatory obligations for investigators to IND safety reporting, IND basics in this particular office, and sponsor meetings that you can have. So it's a very comprehensive list, and as you click through, you'll see that there's additional information available. We just reviewed the Center for Biologics. We're going to go ahead and look at the Center for Drugs Learn pages, and again you'll see that the Learn page resource is at the top of the returns. Here the course list looks a little bit more abbreviated, but again, as I mentioned earlier, if you click through these links, and that's what I'm going to do right here for Cedar World, you get a much more comprehensive view of the types of lessons that the Center for Drugs has developed to inform their audience. And finally, I want to take a look at CDRH Learn. And when we come here, you'll notice that for the Center for Devices and Radiologic Health, that they have actually developed courses not only in English, but also in Chinese and Spanish. And although these are not certified translations, they are the best effort that FDA has put forth, and I've heard very positive feedback from users that they are very useful. Let's take a look here at some of the courses that are available. The overview of regulatory requirements for medical devices is a very, very useful resource for small businesses. And I'm going to open this up and show you that once you expand that, you really get a much more comprehensive list of courses, videos, printable slide sets, and they cover a wide variety of topics, including recently issued guidance documents and the presentations that FDA staff have given for those. Pre-market notification process, the 510K process, has quite a number of presentations. You can get many of your basic questions answered by viewing these series, and then of course the IDE process, the medical device recalls, quality systems, and of particular interest to a number of small businesses that are popping up these days is CDRH regulated software, so that you can understand the integration of software into your product development needs and processes. So that is my review of the FDA's Learn websites. But the Learn websites, as wonderful a resource as they are, may not give you information that is specific enough to inform your product development. And to address this, what FDA has developed are a very extensive series of guidance documents. Guidance documents from the FDA describe the agency's current thinking on a topic. And so if you are developing a product, you may want to see if there are any guidance documents about it. As Eric mentioned during the introduction, I did some of my work at FDA within the division of monoclonal antibodies. So what I'm going to put in here is I'm going to type in guidance and monoclonal antibodies. And when we run that search, you'll see that there are 1,260 hits on the total FDA website that say guidance monoclonal antibodies, that include those terms. And so that was a very general search term. What you might want to do is either peruse the complete list of guidance documents if you have that time, or you may want to narrow your search a little bit more for guidance monoclonal antibody chemistry and manufacturing controls, for instance, and that would bring up a narrower subset. Your search string in that box can be as precise as you want it to be. So in addition to the Learn pages and the guidance documents that you can search for, these resources really offer fairly general information. Through the Freedom of Information Act, each center posts information about products that they either clear or approve for marketing. And small businesses, I always encourage a small business to take a look at these types of documents because you can learn a lot from them. They provide insights into the types of testing that other businesses are providing to FDA to demonstrate safety of their products. They provide information about how clinical data is analyzed statistically, the types of clinical data that may be provided to support efficacy claims, and additionally, through these, what FDA calls reading rooms, you can, for medical devices in particular, see the iterative development for consecutive generations of a product. So instead of going through this for every center, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to look only at the reading room for the Center for Devices and Radiologic Health. But please trust me that the sites do exist for all three centers. So as I mentioned, FDA calls these environments their reading rooms. And by searching CDRH reading room, the top hit will bring us where we want to go. And from here, the way that CDRH organizes things is that they have the primary resource of the reading room, and then they'll let you know what are their most recently posted documents. So if you're looking for something that was approved in the last week or 2 weeks, often it will appear here in the newly posted documents. So we're going to move forward into the electronic reading room. And I want to draw your attention here to this sidebar section on the right that says Other Databases. So you could try and search in here from this page, but you might get many more returns than you would otherwise anticipate. So what I try to encourage companies to do is to identify products that may be similar in one way or another to the product, the technology that they are developing. And for the Center for Devices, you can reach market approval through a pre-market authorization, so pre-market approval, or you can reach market clearance through the 510K pathway. And I want to take you just kind of quickly through both of these. So we're going to start with the PMAs. And when you get to this page, you see Search Database. And there are many different fields that you can complete in order to perform your search. Often, most of this information is going to be unknown to a small business. And so you might know, for instance, the trade name or the brand name of a device that you're going to be referencing. And in my case, coming from Heart, Lung, and Blood, I'm going to choose a device that was recently approved by the trade name MitraClip. And if you search using just the trade name, no other information, you'll see that there are 2 returns. So there's the original approval and then a more recent approval. Going to the original approval will often yield the most expansive information. Iterative development is a way to learn about what a company is doing to improve their product, but often doesn't include the comprehensive amount of information that you will see in the original approval. So let's click through this original approval. And if we come down here to information about this product, you can see the labeling, approval order, and summary of safety and effectiveness. I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to open the summary. And I'm going to reduce the size of this just a little bit so that you can see more comprehensively what is going on in the screen. And you can see here that there's a lot of general information about the device, its indications for use, contraindications, warnings and precautions, a device description, which often includes one or more either graphics, blueprints, or pictures. There are dimensional information. There are how to use the device, practices, places where it may be marketed, adverse effects, preclinical studies, biocompatibility information and testing, sterility testing, animal studies, shelf life studies. This sort of information can help a small business really understand the extent of testing that FDA requires for a 510K submission, and understanding what your competitors have needed to, or your predicate companies have needed to do to prove their efficacy to FDA is often very informative for you as you develop your go-to-market plan. So now I'm going to close down that page, and I'm going to go back to the reading room, and instead of the pre-market approvals, I'm going to go to the 510Ks. So for the pre-market approval, I went ahead and I put in the device name, which is what it would be called on this page. However, for the 510K, you may not know what the exact brand name is of the device that you believe is a predicate, but you may know of a company that is doing research similar to what you are doing. So I'm going to pick on another Heart, Lung, and Blood focused company, AliveCor. And AliveCor develops heart monitors. And you can see that their first approval was in November of 2012 with a heart monitor that was part of an iPhone case. And then in iterative development, they've gone ahead and submitted just a heart monitor unrelated to a specific technology. And then they recently developed an over-the-counter version. So again, the documents that we would be able to pull up for this particular technology would be just as extensive and comprehensive as the information that we pulled up for the PMA, the only difference being that there would be less clinical efficacy data involved. At this point, I have covered the how to find information on the FDA website through the Freedom of Information Act, through the Learn series, and through searching for guidance documents. And so, Eric, I'd like to know, has anyone asked any questions yet?
So at this point, Chris, we do not have any questions. I would just like to remind our viewers that throughout the presentation, you can post your questions if you are watching through a Google Plus account on the Hangout event page by just putting your comments in the comment section. And if you are watching via YouTube, again, please use Twitter and use the hashtag SBIRchat to post your questions, and we will take those and relay those to Chris. Seeing no questions at the moment then, Chris, back to you and continue on with our presentation.
Thank you very much, Eric. So back at our homepage, our FDA homepage, let's take a look. Now that you understand how to find this basic information for FDA's regulation of your biomedical technologies, and you have some general product development information through the Freedom of Information Act reading rooms, you may be thinking that you're ready to prepare your IND or your IDE or your 510K submission. And although it is true that there are some companies that can submit to the FDA without any prior contact with the agency itself, in reality, for most small businesses, this probably isn't the best approach. So, how do you identify a specific person at FDA who can help you answer questions that are specific to your technology? A good way to start this is by reaching out to the small business office at the appropriate center. And if we come here to our homepage and we come to this For Industry section that I pointed out earlier, let's click through on that. In the For Industry section, you'll notice that in addition to different information on the carousel, there's this Navigate the For Industry section that comes right below the carousel. At the very top of the right-hand side of this is Small Business Assistance, and that's really a great place to start. So as we click through there, you'll see it brings you to a small blurb about the small business assistance that FDA generally offers. And then over here on the left-hand side, there are two hyperlinks. One is the Small Business Guide to FDA, which is a useful document to take a look at. It provides some basic overview of FDA regulation and inspections and how to interact with FDA for small businesses. And another useful part of the information in there is that it provides small business contacts. However, for today, instead of going through the guide, we're simply going to click through the Small Business Contacts link. And as you take a look at this, you'll see that each center, the Center for Biologics, for Drugs, for Devices, for Food Safety, Tobacco, Veterinary, and International Programs, each has a contact. And the contact information will include an email address where you can address your questions. It will also provide both a local phone number if you happen to be in the Maryland, D.C., Virginia area, and an 800 or a toll-free number for both domestic and international callers. So another thing that's very common within small businesses is that small businesses may be developing a platform technology. And if that describes your company, you may have already developed a preliminary relationship with FDA related to your first indication for use for your technology. However, you may be now moving into a new area that would be regulated by a different part of FDA or a different division or branch within the same center. And at this point, you're somewhat comfortable with the types of information you're going to need, but you want to talk to someone in that particular division to make sure that you understand their specific requirements, the questions that are more important to that branch or that division. In cases like this, it's really useful to just pick up the phone or to send an email to your target review division. And the best way to do this is to identify who is the appropriate division director or branch chief and reach out to them. On the FDA website, using my favorite, the search box up here in the corner, you can look up contact information. And as I've been mentioning thus far throughout the Hangout, FDA is broken out into centers. So underneath the center level, the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research, are offices and divisions. As long as you understand that the next level down is offices, you will be able to find, searching by the center, CBER, then just type in office. And your top link will come up with CBER offices and divisions. You may not be 100% certain where within the center your product is going to be reviewed, and so if you come to the CBER Key Staff Directory and you open that up, pardon me, you'll see that the Key Staff Directory is broken down by office, and then within that by the directors and the, let me get to a somewhat more, the office of the center director is often a little more rife with people, but the Office for Biostatistics has a division of biostatistics, which has a vaccine evaluation branch, a therapeutics evaluation branch, etc., etc. And so if you are developing a new blood product, the director for the Office of Blood Research and Review would be Dr. Epstein, but you may be developing a specific technology that is looking for a hematological signal or targeting a hematologic disease, at which point you would want to address your questions about your technology to Dr. Basil Golding in the Division of Hematology. And as you can see, there is a phone number provided here, and you can simply pick up the phone and call. This same sort of search works for each of the other centers within FDA also. And so for the CDER offices and division, the return is a little bit different. You don't have to go through that key staff website. It brings you directly to the breakdown by office and division. And if you wanted to be developing a product for a cardiovascular or renal product, you would simply click on the Division of Cardiovascular and Renal Products, and when you were connected through, you would find that the name of the chief of the division would show up. So the director, Dr. Norman Stockbridge, deputy director, the chief of the project management staff, and the mailing address, phone number, and fax number would be right here. Again, the same thing would hold true if we were looking for the CDRH contacts. So in addition to the center review teams, which is what we've just been identifying, which center would, who are the staff in the division who would be reviewing your specific technology, you may be developing a technology that hits more than one center. So you may be developing a combination product. FDA has recognized that there are a number of areas that cross centers where there needs to be a cohesive policy for the regulation of products in those areas. And those three areas where the FDA has developed cohesive offices at the Office of the Commissioner level are combination products, orphan products, and pediatric therapeutics. And so if your company is developing a combination product, again, using the search bar, you would find that the top return for a combination product brings you right here to the combination products homepage, and if you scroll down, you would contact someone in the Office of Combination Products, you could either send a snail mail, an email, or make a phone call, or send a fax. The contact information is right there. The same holds true if you are developing orphan products, with the slight caveat being that for this page, there are quite a number of additional programs that you can find out about, including the voucher program for rare pediatric diseases and the orphan products grants program, which are often very helpful in identifying additional resources to support your research. The contact information for the Orphan Products Development Program, again, is down at the bottom right of the page. And each of these people's names, if you click on it, would lead to open an email message within your browser where you could just email the person directly. And the final group that I mentioned is pediatric therapies. And, that didn't seem to work very well, did it? Let's try something else. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you need to be sometimes creative in the way that you search. So let's go to pediatric products. Well, there you go, pediatric product development. And in this case, you don't see a contact information on the lower right-hand side, but you do see a lot of information about pediatric development and the various regulations that have been involved. In this case, where you need to come to find a specific contact person is under the Resources for You and Pediatric Therapeutics. So if you come to the Pediatric Therapeutics page, down at the bottom, again, you'll find the contact information for both the office, by email, and a phone number. Eric, I'm going to throw this back to you and ask if there are any questions at this point about identifying contact information within the FDA.
So, Chris, we do have one question which actually harks back to the earlier part of your presentation, which is there a guide or flow chart that outlines all the requirements for approval? And if so, where could that be found?
That's a great question, and unfortunately I think I need to bounce back to the person asking the question because I would need to understand more about the type of technology that they're asking about. Are you asking about a drug, a biologic, a medical device, an in vitro diagnostic? In some cases, there actually are flowcharts that can help you understand how your product will be regulated. And in some cases, for instance, with the 510K, there is a checklist to ensure that you have all the parts and pieces that FDA expects to see. However, in terms of which specific tests are required for each specific technology, that information does change from one technology or therapy to another. Are there any other questions, Eric?
Not at the moment.
Okay. So then, now that you understand all of the great information that is available on the FDA website, let's come back to the FDA website and find out how to stay current on the information that they do have to offer. We're going to come back to the home screen, and we're going to scroll down over here to the Follow FDA section. My personal preference is to receive information by email. If you have a different preference where you prefer to follow a Twitter stream or sign up for RSS feeds, much of this process is going to be the same. But I'm going to start by signing up for email updates. So FDA can update you on any number of topics, and they really are very good about pushing information out the way that you want to see it, so that you will receive only that information that is of value to you. So for today, I am going to sign up for biologics. And I want to get information on blood guidance documents that may be released in either draft or final form. So in order to sign up for this, I need to put in my email address. And then submit. And I can identify now how I'd like to receive my information. Do I want to receive information as soon as FDA posts it? Do I want to get a daily update, or do I want to get a weekly update? So I'm not all that concerned about getting an email immediately or every day, but I would like to know each week what new guidance documents have been submitted or released by FDA. So I'm going to submit that. And I'm going to then say, well, but that wasn't the only thing I wanted to know about. And so I'm going to, instead of finishing my sign up, I'm going to go back to subscriber preferences. And I'm going to add some additional subscriptions. So in addition to blood guidances, I would like to know about general CBER guidances, about any recalls that may be coming through, and tissue guidances, vaccine guidances, and I'd like to know if there are any workshops and conferences that may be of interest to either myself or my small business community so that I can make them aware of that. And in addition, perhaps I also want to find out some information about drugs. So I want definitely to know what's going on with small business and industry assistance, and I think it would be very important for me to know what is going on with drug safety news, because that is something that I hold very important. So now I can go ahead and submit my additional alert preferences, and you'll see up at the top of the screen that my subscriptions have been updated, and I will be receiving an email once per week about this. And they also offer me the opportunity to get information from additional sources, such as the National Institutes of Health, the Center for Diseases Control, the Department of Health and Human Services, etc. And so if you find that there are additional places where you would like to get information, then you can go ahead and sign up at the same time. And I am now going to close down this sign up, and I'm going to ask one more time, Eric, have we received any additional questions based upon how to request updated information from FDA?
Well, yes, Chris, they're coming fast and furious now. So just as a follow-up to our previous question about the availability of flowcharts, the questioner was asking specifically with respect to medical devices.
Okay, thank you very much. So as I mentioned, for medical devices, if you are developing a product that can be cleared using the 510K process, then there is a 510K checklist that you can use. And let's come over here, and I will try and do a live search for that. So we'll just type in 510K checklist, and what we identify is that there is a cover sheet checklist for 510K acceptance, and there is a refuse to accept policy for 510Ks, and this is one of those guidance documents that I mentioned earlier. And so between the information on these two documents, the questioner should be able to find much of the information they need to identify if their submission is complete. However, in order to identify if their submission contains the appropriate information, they should both do the research of identifying appropriate predicate devices and looking through their approval summaries, and they should contact FDA to ensure that their submission is as complete as the FDA would like to see it in advance of filing. And that can be done through relatively informal processes, such as an email or a phone call, or can be done through more formal pre-submission meeting process that FDA offers to its industry colleagues. Do we have additional questions, Eric?
So, Chris, with respect to the 510K process, is there a guidance document for design control for the device that is being developed?
Thank you, Eric. There may be design controls or special controls, as they are called, for specific devices. So if I were looking to develop a device, let me suggest some sort of device. What sort of device? So a spirometer, which is a device that you may be familiar with if you've ever been in a hospital and undergone surgery. After your surgery, you're asked to breathe into this tube that measures how much volume your lungs are putting out. So I'm going to type in spirometer, special controls, guidance, and I do not know the answer to the question of whether there are or not, but look, there is indeed a special controls guidance for breath something that we will hopefully open up in a moment. And this special controls guidance document should guide you through what FDA expects to see in a 510K submission for a well-characterized device. Apparently my internet connection is a little bit slow in loading, and I may or may not actually be sharing my screen at the moment. There we go, I am sharing the screen, and let's see if we get to that. So this is this particular special controls document deals with breath nitric oxide test system. So this would not necessarily be the appropriate control specifically for a spirometer, but if we were to go back to the original search page, the return of the search page, we might find the more appropriate guidance document. Do we have additional questions, Eric?
Chris, one of our viewers wants to know, is there a way to find out about clinical trials, procedures and results, etc., of products that are similar to the one that the small business is currently developing?
That is a great question, and the answer is sometimes. So it depends how the company has presented their information. Through the clinicaltrials.gov website, you will see, or if you've ever gone on to clinicaltrials.gov, let's just let that return the appropriate. The clinicaltrials.gov protocol registration system is a mandated registration for companies developing FDA-regulated products within the U.S. for phase 2 and greater studies. And you will often find some information about protocols through this website. I'm sorry, I clicked the wrong link. Let me go back. Here we go, through the home site. So if you wanted to search, for example, as they have your heart attack in Los Angeles, it would return a series of clinical trials going on in that area, in that geographic area, and that indication. Additionally, it would put out not just what is current, but what is upcoming and what is closed out and post-recruiting, post-analysis. And at the end of any clinical trial, the sponsor is required to post some summary of the results on this website. Additionally, if you go into the summary of safety and efficacy for a 510K or a biologic or a PMA, then there is also information in there about both the clinical protocols as they were run, although it won't be as complete a design standard as a full protocol would be. And there is information about the proof that the sponsor provided to FDA to ensure either superiority or non-inferiority or efficacy in a new indication. And since we already reviewed those websites, I will not go back and look through those again. Do we have additional questions, Eric?
Chris, those are all the questions we have at this time.
Okay. Well then, I want to say thank you to our audience for joining us today. And so, as we did review a number of websites of general interest, including the FDA homepage, the FDA Small Business Guide, the FDA Small Business Contacts, and the FDA Information Update Request page. We also went to the electronic reading rooms that were created in the Freedom of Information Act. Some of the information will be redacted on those pages, but by far the vast majority of information that small businesses can learn by reviewing those documents is quite valuable. And we visited the pages for both the Center for Biologics, Center for Drugs, and Center for Devices and Radiologic Health. We also reviewed how to search for guidance documents. We went to the contact pages to identify division and branch contacts for the Center for Biologics, Center for Drugs, and Centers for Devices and Radiologic Health. We looked at the pan-FDA area of interest offices, the Office of Combination Products, the Office of Orphan Drug Products, and the Office of Pediatric Therapeutics. I hope that you have found today's presentation to be useful and informative, and I'd like to share with you some upcoming future regulatory basic hangouts that we have planned. In June, we will be discussing first contact with FDA, how to make that initial contact, how to know who to send your paperwork to, where to submit it, and what the types of first contact might be, from a request for designation for a combination product through a pre-submission meeting or a pre-IND meeting with respective centers. In September, we will be providing an overview of medical device classification and regulation. And in December, we will be providing an overview of drug and biologics regulation. I hope that you have enjoyed today's Hangout, and I thank you very much for your attendance today. If there are no final questions, or perhaps if there are, Eric, back to you.
No final questions at this point, but do join us again. You can follow us on Twitter at NHLBI_SBIR, or our general Twitter account, which is NIH_NHLBI, and also follow us on YouTube just by searching NHLBI. Over to you, Chris, and thanks to all of our viewers.
So this completes today's regulatory hangout, and I do hope that you have found this to be useful and informative. If you are developing technologies within NHLBI mission space, please do contact us. If you are developing products or technologies that fall outside of our mission space, please contact one of our sister institutes or centers here at the NIH, or use the information that you learned during today's hangout to contact the appropriate review divisions within the Food and Drug Administration. Thank you very much.